name is Michael Gabbianelli, and welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Tuesdays. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about ice axes and ice tools, and kind of the difference between those and some of the basics of both of those things. So you might be scratching your head right now, Mike, what is an ice axe and an ice tool? I didn't know there was a difference. Well, that's what we're going to get into today, talking about some of the differences of those two pieces of gear. So the first one we're going to explore is the ice axe, or could also be known as by the name piolet. And so what this axe is used for is for climbing frozen conditions, snow and ice, and mountaineering. So what you're going to use this one for is you're going to be using it to kind of keep yourself in the snow as you climb up in the snow and ice. So one thing, if you're not familiar with mountaineering, think about folks climbing Everest. They're going to be carrying each and every person on the mountain there is going to have one of these, because this is kind of your lifeline. It's got a spike on the bottom, and that you're going to use that to actually drive that into the snow as you're walking along. It's also got your axe in the front. And then this one's got what we call an adze on the back. And so that's used for like digging out snow or ice, creating a shelf or a step, whatever you might need. It's kind of like, I like to think about it like a garden hoe, but for ice and snow up in the mountains. So those are the parts of your piolet: your head, shaft, point, axe. So all of these parts make up your ice axe. So some of the things you're going to notice with this compared to the tools once you go over is that this is longer than your ice tool. So it's got a nice long shaft, and that shaft is actually going to be adjusted. So you're actually going to get a longer tool if you're taller, or a shorter tool if you're smaller. So it does need to be a specific size based on how big you are. And so they'll sell this same axe longer and shorter depending on the height. This particular axe is set to my height. This also, one difference you're going to notice with the ice axe compared to the ice tool is that the ice axe, you're only usually going to carry one of these. So you're only going to have one ice axe out there with you that you're going to have to carry along to self-arrest, help you up the mountain, all the different things you might use this for. Typically, if you're carrying more than one, you'd probably be carrying ice tools at that point, because you'll be doing something more sustained or vertical. So, again, when we're talking about the use of the ice axe, it's really for climbing snowy, icy conditions. And I would say, again, think of kind of folks climbing up Everest. They're not necessarily climbing up a sheer face, but they are slogging up the mountain with one of these, kind of stepping through ice and snow as they go, using this to control themselves and their footing and keep them anchored into the ice and snow as they go. Great. So that is the ice axe. Let's move on into the ice tool. All right. So here we have an ice tool. So first thing you should probably notice on this is its shape, right? It's much more bent than my ice axe. So let's take up this ice axe. It's bent while the ice axe is pretty straight, right? There's a slight bend in it, but it's mostly straight. Also, notice the size difference, right? When I put them up next to each other, the ice axe is quite a bit taller than my ice tool. Another thing you're going to notice is take a look at that bottom. This one is rounded with a bit of a point, while this one is a straight spike that I'm going to be driving into the ground. Ice tools, again, the main difference is you're going to use these to climb what we call waterfall ice. And so if you have a picture in your head of someone ice climbing and they're on a big piece of clear ice and they're using two of these to go up the mountain like that, that's what we call ice climbing, and that's kind of ice we call waterfall ice. So this is your ice tool. You're going to use it to climb waterfall ice. Again, it's got a nice bent shaft. It doesn't have that spike on the bottom because you're not driving it into the ground. Another thing you're going to notice is that grip. You see how aggressive these things are. As you're grabbing it, it helps keep your hand locked in there. Also, sometimes you might double up, so you have another spot for your fingers up here as well. And that's very common on these ice tools. Unlike our ice axe, remember, it has just a piece of grip tape there because you're going to be driving that handle down into the snow. So these would really get in the way if you were using this as a technical ice axe. And so this is an ice tool again. So bent, you're going to use 2 of these instead of 1. So again, another difference. Ice axe, you're going to use 1 of them. On these, you're going to use usually 2 because you're going to be climbing up really steep ice, and so you're going to need 1 for each hand as you go up. These come with an adze on one side, just like our ice axe, and on the other side, you're going to notice a hammer. And so that's used for different things that you might use a hammer for, breaking up ice, driving in a stake. Very useful tool. You can find these also on ice axes. However, the adze is much more common on an ice axe than the hammer. But since we have 2, I got 1 with an adze, 1 with a hammer, so I can use each one depending on what use I have, what I'm doing. Another thing that we're going to talk about is in the shape and the size. Remember how we talked about the ice axe was a specific size for each individual? Well, and it's based upon your height and size. This is not that way. So this ice axe is pretty universal. So you're going to get pretty much the same set of tools no matter the size person you are. And so this will only come in this size. You can get more aggressive, so more bend to them, or less bend depending on what kind of ice you are climbing. However, those tools are usually going to be a standard length as opposed to the ice axe, which will come in different lengths depending on your height. Another thing is with these that I'd like to talk about is leashes. And so on this other one, you're going to notice this strap that's attached. And this is what we call an ice leash. And so you're going to come in there with your hand and attach your hand like so. And what that's going to do is, it's going to give you a little bit of support here on your wrist as you're using that tool. Also, what it's going to do is as you're climbing that really vertical ice, if you drop it, you won't lose your tool. So again, when you are climbing vertical ice with these tools, you're on some really steep stuff. And so if you drop a tool, that can be very dangerous for the people below you, as well as you're not going to be able to continue climbing without your tool. So you're going to need to keep track of these bad boys while you're on the cliff. And it is very possible to drop them because your hands get cold, you're wearing gloves, all these kinds of things come into play as you're climbing ice. One last thing I'd like to mention on the leashes is a lot of what you're seeing nowadays is moving away from these actual leashes that are attached to the tool to more of a retainer leash. And so you got an example here. Notice that it's pretty bungee, and it's got a spot to attach to your harness on one side, and on the other side you got these nice little carabiner gator clips. And what you can do with that is attach that directly to the tool itself. And then if you drop that tool, it's not going to stay right there on your arm, but it will get caught by your harness and not drop all the way down to the ground. And so these can be a really great option when you're doing more technical ice climbing and you're actually pushing yourself a little further, and those leashes sometimes can be a little bit cumbersome and kind of in your way. Great. So, in review, before I leave you for the day, we have our ice axe and our ice tool. The main differences are going to be size and use. Outside of that, you're going to have kind of some differences, again, within regards to the shape of the pick, the type of handle you have. So, again, very different pieces of gear, often thought of as the same thing. However, they are much different. So again, if you're going out there and want to get on the mountain, make sure you're buying the right thing for what you're going to want to be doing. So again, you want this if you're climbing those big mountains and you're doing a lot more snow travel, snow and ice travel kind of combined. We call really hard snow alpine ice. So a lot of alpine ice and snow travel. This is your best tool right here. Your ice axe. And if you're going to be doing some technical ice climbing and you're climbing waterfall ice, you're going to want a set of tools, ice tools, you're going to use in tandem to go up the wall. Great. So that's been a little bit about ice tools and ice axes. hopefully you guys learned a little bit about the difference between those two. And we'll see you next week for another Tech Talk Tuesday.